Welcome to the Weekly Juice Podcast, where we discuss all things real estate, personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and the many ways to achieve financial independence. We interview accomplished investors and entrepreneurs with the goal that their stories inspire you to take control of your financial future. Here to get your creative juices flowing, while also documenting their own personal investing journeys, are your hosts, Corey Jacobson and Ryan Bevilacqua.
Welcome back to the Weekly Juice. As always, it's your boys Ryan and Corey here with another episode. Today we had the pleasure of interviewing Gino Barbaro. He is an entrepreneur that has grown his real estate portfolio to over 2,000 units, multifamily units, by the way. He and his partner Jake, they teach others how to invest in multifamily real estate. Gino, I should say, is a restaurateur from New York who has moved down to Florida, but his partner lives in Tennessee, I believe.
Knoxville, yeah.
Knoxville. And so these guys basically met years back when Jake was a medical sales rep and came in, had some dinners at Gino's restaurant in New York. And they both realized they wanted a little bit more out of life and were seeking something else, cue in real estate. And basically Gino takes us through the story of how they formed their partnership, how they scaled their portfolio, starting really in multifamily apartments. Now, he had a couple units himself. Speaking of Gino, he had a couple duplexes, but he realized it wasn't scalable. So he decided to partner up with Jake, and they built a business. And really, they have a bunch of different layers with this, but Gino handles most of the educational side. And you'll hear us talk about this in the episode, but he has about 5 different podcasts. He also has an educational
whole community. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They have a whole community. 68,000. I'm reading this here. 68,000 units closed on by their community, which is over $4 billion in deal volume. And so they've been at it for a long time. And this episode is tactical in the beginning. We talk a lot about the real estate. Gino bought a 27 units, I believe, the two of them together as he had a couple small deals, but that was dove right into bigger deals, which was really cool. But as you get towards, the end of this episode, one of our favorite conversations that we've had in a long time, we really talk about life coaching, the philosophy of doing why any of us are doing what we're doing. Why do we even try to obtain more money? And it's really interesting. I think it could be really eye-opening for our audience as you might be grinding. You might be driving home from work right now thinking about, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right things? It's such interesting, unique conversations that we're so blessed to be able to have. And Gino and his wife are life coaches themselves who do this as part of what they do for a living. This guy's 5 podcasts. You can just tell by the way he talks. He has a very succinct, matter-of-fact tone but I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from the episode. Sorry if this seemed a little bit rushed. I could not nail this guy's last name.
Too much.
And we just had a giggle fest for literally 10 minutes.
This was 8 times we did the intro. Yes. And then I tried to take it from you and I messed it up. And It was one of those buttery, flaky, crispy crust. That was what we got into.
Unbelievable.
It was terrible.
I kept saying his last name was Barbaro. It's Barbaro. And I for the life of me, could not get it done. Then Corey did the intro and he said he was Ryan and I was Corey. So we've had a time. But I will say this is one of our favorite episodes of 2024 because the way we get into the mentality, and I know that we generalize this a lot, but we talk about psychology of money, about partnerships, and just kind of diving deep on yourself and why you do the things you do and what makes you tick. I think Corey and I know selfishly, we love these types of conversations. And it's usually kind of once you get comfortable in an interview, it usually happens at the 40-minute mark, takes us through the end of the show. And we really got in deep here and kind of peeled back some layers on ourselves. At least I did. It got me thinking a lot of why I do what I do, why I like specific things in the business, and why I have a chip on my shoulder in certain ways. And I just loved the episode.
Felt like a therapy session.
It kind of was a therapy session. Yeah. But Gino has been doing this for so many years, and it's really cool to have a guest like this come on the show and just share life experiences. I think I paused at one point in the episode. I was like, dude, I just like the way you answer questions. And because then he fires back with a question, and he gives always an obstacle that he's overcome and never paints the sexy side for you and explains I think he calls him Maserati Mike and explained how a bad partnership formed and he lost $175,000. And I don't know, something about it. This episode is just one of my favorite ones. If you got through the intro, you're going to love the episode. Sorry, we're a bit goofy tonight, but
Having fun with it.
Yeah. Without further ado, I think we bring in Gino. When you have investment properties and tenants, you need a good system in place for collecting rent to make it easy as possible. And RentRedi can help you with everything. When you sign up for RentRedi, you can start adding your properties, inviting tenants, and creating charges. You can even set up automatic rent reminders and create auto late fees as well. For tenants, they can pay via ACH, card, or even cash using RentRedi's web and mobile apps. They can also use an automatic payment setup and sign up for rent reporting so they get rewarded for paying rent on time. RentRedi saves you time and hassle by automating rent collection, and you can manage everything from one dashboard. For our Weekly Juice listeners, RentRedi's given us a special 50% off for any RentRedi plan using our code WeeklyJuice at rentredi.com. That's RentRedi.com using the code WeeklyJuice. That's WeeklyJuice to save 50% off any RentRedi plan. Gino, officially welcome to the Weekly Juice podcast. Corey and I are so excited to have you on the show, man. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Love being on.
Absolutely. So we have seen your face everywhere. And
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
We know that you have a lot of kind of background in education, syndications, buying apartments, and personal finance. So I think we could take this a bunch of different ways, but maybe start us with a brief background on yourself and then kind of how you got into real estate investing. I know everyone asks that, but it helps frame the entire show. So I just want a little sneak peek into how you got to where you are today.
Well, the great thing is I didn't start in real estate. I mean, I've only been in real estate for maybe 12 years, 15 years. I started back in the restaurant business years and years ago. I had a restaurant in New York and I owned it with the family. But for me, I had started work with my dad since I was 8 years old. And, you know, fast forward to 2007, he passed away. And I was been with him, I mean, my entire life, adult life, working with him. And when he passed away, I really questioned myself. I said, am I living his dream or am I living my dream? And it really bothered me because I'm like, do I really like the restaurant or do I really like working with him? And in 2008, I picked up a book called The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker, which completely really pissed me off, rocked my world, annoyed me. I love him. I hate him. And it felt as if T. Harv Eker in that book spoke to me because he says your fruits are in your roots. I'm Italian. I like to eat. So there's always a reference to food. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And what it meant to me was that I was sucking out at life. I was blaming everybody else. It was everyone else's fault. Why wasn't I making more money? Why wasn't I more productive? Why wasn't I happier? And once I understood that it was all about personal responsibility and really taking a look at your life and saying you are where you are and you got where you got because of what you've been doing, everything changed after I read the book. I sought out mentorship in multifamily specifically. I met my business partner, Jake, in 2009. He was a pharmaceutical rep taking orders out of my restaurant. And he knew nothing about real estate. But what really happened and what was great about it was in 2011, he decided to leave New York and move to Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm like, Jake, when you get there, let's start looking at deals. I've got some experience in real estate. You want to get out of your day-to-day job. I'd like to eventually one day leave the restaurant. Let's partner up. Let's start looking at deals. And it took us 18 months to find that very first deal in 2013. 3 months after that, we found our second deal. And I guess as people like to say, the rest is history. But for anybody listening to this podcast, just because you haven't started in real estate, just because you don't know about real estate, doesn't mean you can't become successful in real estate.
Yep, exactly. So, Gino, I want to take it back. And you mentioned, you kind of glossed over that, you read a book and then you got into real estate investing. But I'm curious, I'm not sure if you mentioned the why behind real estate investing because, people see the glamour and or what they think is glamour and the being an entrepreneur and having all this money and free time. What about real estate investing? Was it your background? What was it that got you intrigued in that and gave you your start?
My parents were entrepreneurs. I mean, they're immigrants, so they both liked real estate. And, the origin story for me is for specifically why multifamily. I'm at the restaurant one night. It's a Friday night. It's 9:00 at night. I'm in the parking lot by myself. There's 7 inches of snow. I'm scraping out the ice. I'm pissed off. I hate cold weather. And it's another week where I'm making goose eggs. I'm not making any money that week. My mom owns the building and I'm paying her rent. And on top of the building, she has 3 apartments. And that night, I look up and one of those apartments had the light on. And it dawned on me. My mom is at home, in bed, sleeping, getting paid, while I'm out here working and not getting paid. And I just made the connection. I'm like, apartment owners make money in their sleep. That's really what it came down to. And I was really, once again, that T. Harv Eker light bulb moment for myself. I'm like, how do I get more of that? How do I do that? At the time, I only had 4 kids. I've got 6 kids now. So we can always say, hey, we want to make more money. I just wanted to stop being afraid of money. I was always afraid of money, of not having enough. How do I get more of it? And how do I shape my relationship with money to make it more healthy? And how do I create wealth? And I'm standing in the parking lot going, well, my mom with the 5th grade education, who never went to high school or college because she immigrated from Italy, she's on the path. Why the heck am I not on the path? So that's when it dawned on me that day, I want real estate. And for me, making mistakes before I met Jake, I always say there was life before Jake and life after Jake. Life before Jake, I made tons of mistakes. When I met Jake, I was ready to go. I understood the business. We created the framework, buy right, manage right, finance right. That's the process. We like to call it the map. I didn't have that beforehand. And when I met him, we started buying deals. We just started seeing that things were very similar. You buy a deal, you repeat it. The second one's sort of the same. The third one's sort of the same. There's always differences within the deal. But if you can create some type of framework or some type of structure in anything that you're trying to do, you can replicate those results.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your relationship with money. And before we get into the apartments, I want to go, because a lot of people are probably interested. You bought a big apartment. Big is subjective, right? But you bought a big apartment as your first deal, which I think is pretty interesting. But before that, let's talk about maybe the psychology of money. I know you just wrote a book. The why and the money aspect of why you're even doing what you're doing is really important before you go into the how-to, in my opinion. So tell us about that book, and just tell us about, why you wrote it and what it had to do, what it was all about, and how money, the relationship you have with it, plays a factor before going into the apartments.
It's interesting, Corey. I mentioned I read a book. I wish I'm going to write this book because it's
got
important.
it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was written by Ken Honda. It was called Happy Money. And I've been doing a lot of work myself, personal development, and trying to figure out my journey and my relationship with money. Because another great book that everyone needs to read, it's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And what people don't understand, because I became a life coach in 2015, and for me, it triggered all these questions. And we do so many things at an unconscious level that we're not aware of. We have all these beliefs that we bring into our adulthood from childhood. Go back to the ages between 8 and 12 or 13 years old as you're listening to this, and think about your childhood. Who was around when you were learning about money? I mean, I had great parents. They were entrepreneurs, but all I heard was, you need to save money. Stay small. Don't take any risks. We don't need to be like them. And when I kept hearing that, it takes money to make money. It's a little expensive. I had a little bit of a scarcity mindset. Listen, I had one restaurant for over 20 years. How do I go from one restaurant for over 20 years to meet Jake, and within 5 years, we have 1,500 apartments? How does that even that makes no sense whatsoever. What I truly started to understand was the relationship with money, how I was such in a scarcity mindset, and how that really affected me going forward, trying to buy more apartments, trying to build a business. Was I worthy? Was I doing the right thing? And once I understood that, the relationship that I had and what was holding me back and all those limiting beliefs, I just started challenging them. And obviously, when you do your first deal and you use creative financing, well, it takes money to make money. Well, does it take money to make money? Not really. On our 5th deal, we had a 281 unit deal. It was an $11 million deal. It was fully owner financed, 80% by the bank, and the seller held a 20% note, an $11 million deal. People are going to tell you, you can't do that. Well, if you think you can't do that, then you can't do that. So I just want everyone listening to this, be real with yourself. Go back, challenge what beliefs you have about money, beliefs you have about wealth, beliefs you have about growing, starting a business, investing in real estate. What's holding you back? And start challenging those beliefs. Because if Jake and Gino, a pizza guy and a drug rep, can figure out how to do it, then I think anybody can.
Well, I'll let Rye jump in too, because I know he probably has a lot to say here. But one of the things I want to mention, Gino, is that they say that you want to change your life, you change your environment, right? And what your environment really is the people that you surround yourself with. And I think that is, it's cliche. Like, we always throw around terms like mindset. Got your mindset right. And I hear it all the time. I'm like, what does that truly mean? But what you just said is really what it means. You surrounded yourself with somebody who thought bigger and they were able to bring you to a space that allowed you to do bigger. And that's really what it comes down to. I mean, you could have lived probably a pretty happy life doing what you did for the rest of your life, and nothing wrong with it. But like, if you want to think bigger, you have to expand those horizons, and sometimes that's getting out of your comfort zone. So I think going from that to the 1,500 apartment units, it's a great story, and I want to get into the actual apartments. Ryan, did you have something you want to go into?
Yeah, I just want to kind of keep it where it's at for now and talking about like getting one's financial house in order. There's a lot of people that'll hear the podcast, right? And they're like, great, I got my mindset around money, right? I understand maybe I got to take more risks now, but there's a lot of people that they still don't have, maybe they have a ton of student loans. They still are spending way more than they're kind of, I don't want to say saving, but and investing, right? Like there's always more bills than there is paycheck at the end of the month, right? Or something like that. And then, but to become an investor for me and Corey, it was like really shaping our mindset around money and getting getting our financial house in order, right? Getting all of our ducks in a row. So that way we were at least well equipped to go out and handle the next big thing. Mm-hmm. I want your thoughts on that, but I also want your thoughts. Well, something that you glazed over, which was kind of insane, is you started this thing having 4 kids. I have one of my own now, and I realize how limited my own time is. So can you also talk to managing, like how you studied and learned how to invest in apartments and then eventually took one down, and maybe how your mentorship, I know you sought out mentorship from someone, how that parlayed into it and helped you kind of scale to the next level? Because a lot of people listening probably have kids and like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get out of this rut that I'm in, going my 9 to 5, trying to save money, trying to pay for their schooling, pay for their what. So I know there's a lot there, but I'm thinking kids and money.
Yeah. I'm trying to formulate, I guess, a proper response where I should start with that question. People with financial intelligence can change the world for the better. That's the reality. But when you're working on yourself, why is it that when somebody gets money, one person saves and buys an asset, and the other person goes out and spends that money? I'm teaching my kids the delayed gratification. But if you don't understand what's going on through your psychology, some people just are wired that they want dopamine hits. They just like that dopamine hit, and they feel really good when they spend money. I felt good saving money, but it was really hard to take that money out and invest it in deals because I like to see the money in the bank. So you need to really understand what's going on inside of you. Why do you have tons of student loans? Let's start there. What made you go out and take student loans? What made you go out and take $150,000 worth of loans when you're going to get a job making 45 or 50 G's a year? Now, I'm not criticizing. I'm not putting blame on anybody, but you created that. That was your decision to make. Now go out and seek somebody who can help you get out of that. And it only starts with you. Once you stop being the victim, everything changes. I was a victim in 2008. It was Obama's fault. It was the economy. It was the restaurant business. It was none of those. It was me. Once I sought out that I was the responsible one and I can take control, then I can go out and I can start answering some of those questions of how do I start buying real estate? How do I find a really good partner? How do I start investing? But if I'm in the victim mode where none of it's my fault, then I'll never start coming up with those answers. And for me, mentorship was so important. If you're out there spending 60 G's a year to go to college, you can't spend $20,000 on how to buy restaurant apartments. That's the problem that I see right now in society right now. The college has no ROI value on it, right? We're just told that we're needed to do that. And for me, having 4 kids, that was just an impetus to me. I always worked hard. It was in my DNA to work hard. If you've ever owned a restaurant or worked in the restaurant, it is a thankless job. It's almost like anything else. The food comes out quick. You have a great meal. Everything's great. Something goes wrong, the end of the world. So you're taught to work really hard and to be really responsible. And for me, with 4 kids, I couldn't make any excuses. I had to find the time. And at that time, it's really interesting. I was homeschooling the kids in the morning before going to the restaurant. Then I would go to the restaurant, and during lunch at 2 o'clock, I would stop. I'd work for an hour from 2 to 3 in the real estate. Then from 3 to 8 was dinner service. I would get home at 8 o'clock, spend a few minutes with the kids. Kids go to bed, 9:30, 10, be back on the computer and doing the work. It's because I knew what my why was. I couldn't make any more excuses. Didn't have the luxury, thank God. They really didn't have Netflix back then. They didn't have streaming back then. So I was super hyper focused. And sometimes people say, my mom used to say to me specifically, oh, you're working too hard. You got to enjoy life. And when you hear that, you are on the right path. Because for me, real estate wasn't work. The restaurant was work, right? I was moving away from pain, but I was moving towards pleasure with real estate. And am I here to tell you, man, it's going to be easy peasy? The first couple of years, you need to suck it up, Buttercup. That's the reality. And if you can't suck it up, then let's stop having this conversation. But once you do suck it up and you start working really hard, it gets a little bit easier. And then 40 hours a week is a joke. 50 is not piece of cake. Then you start liking it and you start getting good at it. And then it doesn't get to be really hard. And there's no such thing as balance with kids and family. There's no such thing as when you're an entrepreneur. There's no such thing as family life balance. I try to have my kids present. I try to have my kids around the business. They come to the Jake and Gino events. I'll spend time with them in the morning. I'm lucky that I have an office at home. I do a podcast with my wife, so I spend time with her there. We actually had a branding call today with somebody talking about branding. All of these myths that you hear, the 4-hour work week, that's not what entrepreneurship is all about. Because when you become really successful and you really like something, why would you stop doing it? Like, who ever thought that was a good idea? I'm really kicking ass now. I'm making $5 million a year. I love what I'm doing. I'm helping thousands of people. I'm just going to quit and retire on a beach. That's for somebody who's got a W-2 job, who hates their life, and that's what they're looking forward to. That's not what I'm looking forward to. So just be clear on that. As you're building your business out. You just want to get really good at something, really enjoy it, and just start leaning into it.
Absolutely. So the life, we call it lifestyle architecture, right? So you're designing a life that you really want to live. That might include a lot of hard work. That might include a lot of sacrifice. That might include a lot of great times as well. But it's not just working, and then stopping that, right? So I love that. I want to talk about the first couple deals that you did, because to go from working at the restaurant to buying, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, close to a 30-unit apartment complex was your first deal, right? 27 units? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I read that about you guys while I was doing some homework. So what does that look like? How did you get that deal? And the reason why I want to focus on that one is because it's a wake-up call for people. You can go from having a W-2 job to buying a 30-unit apartment complex. And
absolutely.
Gino is living proof. So tell us how you did it.
So for me, I had already bought a couple smaller deals before Jake. I had actually invested in Rochester, New York. I bought a couple of duplexes. I didn't like the model. I couldn't scale. So when I met Jake, I'm like, bro, we're going to be in Knoxville. You're a drug rep. You're driving around. We can't buy 2 or 3 units. Let's try to go as big as possible. So we went out and we actually, got my brother as a partner. So there was 3 of us. The 25-unit deal was a $600,000 deal. Back at the time, it was expensive. It was $25 a door, around $25,000 per unit. That may seem like a joke nowadays, but rents were $300 a month, and there were weekly renters. It was just, for lack of a better word, a shit show. I mean, it was a really, I called it a little crack den. It wasn't one of those deals that I'd buy today, but I would have bought that back then. We had to use seller financing on the deal. We tried every trick in the trade. Go out, and I didn't have the luxury of syndicating back then because there was no money, there was no capital out there. Syndication, I don't want to say it was a dirty word, but bank financing was challenging. The economy was terrible. And it was a really challenging deal, the first deal. But I partnered up with Jake and my brother. We each brought our own capital into the deal. And from there, 3 months later, we bought a 36-unit deal. But that one required an additional partner to partner up. And, guys, we did things backwards. Most people that get into the space go out and syndicate deals first. We waited till we had 300 or 400 units, and then we started syndicating because we were able to hold on. And the key for me was I was still working at the restaurant. The restaurant was funding my lifestyle. The real estate, everything I made in the real estate kept going into the portfolio. We call it the conveyor belt. Putting deals on this imaginary conveyor belt where these deals matriculate after a year or 2 years. Then we would either exit them by a sale, but we wouldn't sell. We would exit with the refinance. Take those refinance proceeds and buy the next deal. So on that very first deal that we had bought, 18 months later, we refinanced at $164,000. That money went into our other deal. The second deal, same thing. About 18 months after that second deal, we were able to refi out, almost $300,000 on that second deal. So as you see, you give yourself some time and you reinvest those funds into the next deal. People say within 5 years, you can become financially free in multifamily. I 100% agree. If you take your time, you follow the framework, you buy really good deals, and you reinvest the money that you make into the portfolio to continue to build what you have.
Great, Gino. So what does buying a good deal look like? I mean, it probably looks a little bit different in 2017 than it does in 2024, but I'm sure the principles are still relatively the same. So what does buying a good deal, how does that structure work? Maybe if you want to share about how you're doing it or how you bought some of those early properties, what's the best way to find them and then get the deal done?
That was a great question when I started out. I'm looking for a deal. Well, what's a deal? A deal to Jake and Gino is a lot different than a deal for you guys or a deal for somebody starting out. I think, first of all, what you have to understand is what you're trying to accomplish in real estate, right? That's what people don't understand. It's really specific to themselves. And even when they're raising capital for investors, you have to ask the investor that you're raising money from, what does the deal look like for them? Does it fit their goals? Does it align with what they're trying to do? But at a base level in and of itself, when you're looking at the buy right, the manage right, and the finance right, we call it the buy box, your criteria. And unfortunately, it's changing as the market cycle changes, because a deal back in 2013, you're buying old assets, C's, in areas that are okay. Those asset prices over the market cycle have escalated to the point where they're pretty close to a B property. So you're changing criteria. 3-4 years ago, you're buying assets, and in 18 months, you're flipping them. That's not the case in this part of the market cycle. You're having to hold assets longer. So for us in this part of the market cycle, our buy criteria, let's be really specific. And for you listening to this, you may be out there, you've never done a deal before. This may sound like a lot. And oh, by the way, this works in any real estate niche. If you're looking for single family homes, you should have a buy criteria. We're looking for East Tennessee, specifically Knoxville. We're looking for median incomes of $50,000 or more. We love 1980s and newer. I like the brick behind you guys. Brick is awesome. Hardy works really well. Pitched roofs. Anywhere from 20 to 200 units. Even more. If you got 300, let's see them, Mr. or Mrs. Broker. We love townhome style units. If you got 2 beds, 1.5 baths, love those. If you've got, garages, excellent. If you've got decks out there, I'd love to have the decks covered because it really protects the decks. But if not, we're not crazy about breezeways. But if there's breezeways, we're not going to say no to it. You see how crystal clear I'm getting on it? We love 2 beds. Studios, if you're going to have studios, I need to have just a couple and mix it in. Washer, dryer hookups. We love washer, dryer hookups. We love, buildings that have some type of amenities. Now, when you can get crystal clear on a buy right criteria, all of a sudden you can convey that to the broker. You can convey that to your investors. And when a deal like that pops up, you don't even have to underwrite the deal. You know that deal is yours, and you can go out and you can, strike on that deal. So for anybody out there, figure out what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. And then the second part is what market you're in. Every market's different. I mean, I live here in St. Augustine, so Jacksonville is 45 minutes north. If I had that criteria in Jacksonville, it wouldn't work. The buildings are a lot older. They're either old buildings or brand new buildings. Median incomes are a lot higher here than they are in Knoxville. And there's a lot of studios and 1-beds because there used to be a lot of government, there's a lot of military housing here. So a lot of those metrics don't work in this market. So understand what your market is and then try to figure out ultimately what your exit strategy is. Are you buying this deal for the long term? That's why we want to buy assets that are a little bit newer, because if we're going to hold this deal for the next 10 or 15 years, CapEx is going to come up. Buildings are going to get older. Is the area going to change? So understanding your criteria will help you become clear on what you're looking for. More importantly, the people that you're working with, what kind of stuff you're looking for, they can help you find that as well.
Very cool. Thank you. I think it is important to be super clear on exactly what you're looking for. And I like that you also mentioned that's for single families as well and duplexes, right? It doesn't matter what scale you're at or what strategy you're using. You need to have that buy box narrowed down so you know what you're headhunting for. Can you talk us through the process of buying an apartment complex? And I think, as I mentioned too, I think we mentioned this pre-recording, we've had people on the show and we've talked through the process of syndicating, right? And raising capital and putting people into deals, but also we haven't really gotten to the process of underwriting and how you mentioned what you look for, right? Now take us through something comes across your desk. Maybe, trust me, I've seen all the sheets and we've gone through the underwriting process. I know they're insane and there's a lot of different factors, but maybe an overview of how you might underwrite something and then like the process of going through it, maybe how it differs from a single family home.
I'm trying to go back to your point that you had just made about buy right, manage right, finance right. It should be just even for single family homes. When you're buying a business, you need to buy the business properly. You need to finance it properly. SBA loan, seller financing, bank financing, but you also need to manage it. That's the wheel of the wheelbarrow. We have the wheelbarrow. The buy right is the back leg. The finance right's the others. When those are done, they're fixed. The manage is the manage right, the processes and the systems that you need. Now, when you're specifically looking for an apartment complex, I'm going to walk you through basically how we were successful. Early on, because this is stuff that I did when I met Jake. Before Jake, I had none of this. So the first thing you need to do is go into a market and understand the market. Be an expert. We picked Knoxville. So we learned about all of the different brokers in Knoxville, all the different deals. And back then, guys, we bought stuff on LoopNet. There was stuff on LoopNet sitting there for years. And you're like, well, LoopNet, well, it's coming back. Deals are coming back to go on LoopNet again. The market's cycling back. It's taking longer. And, there's a little bit differences of what happened in the last recession to this one. Banks are healthier now than they were back then. I think a lot of people mezz debt, and I think equity is going to get crushed in this market cycle as opposed to the last market cycle where banks got walloped. But first thing you need to do is become an expert. Know what valuations are. Know the values in your market. Know where rents should be. Know where expenses should be. Know the top 3 or 4 or 5 brokers. Google multifamily brokers, Greenville, South Carolina. Get all those brokers, get on all of their lists. Start getting their offering memorandums. And when you start seeing stuff that you may like, that's when you say to yourself, hey, Mr. Broker, I saw you've got this listing. Can we do a property tour? You need to go on site. That's what's really important. It is a relationship-based business. And, if you're out there, you're saying, well, I can't get to the market. That market's not for you. You need to have to actually visit it. And if you can't, like I did, Jake was in the market. So now that you've got that all done, for the buy right, we can keep it real simple. We like the 1% rule. If you're buying an asset that's $100,000 a unit, post-renovation, we want to get at least $1,000 in rents for that deal to work. It may seem simple, may seem, wow, is it really? But when you're buying deals internally for yourself, it makes a ton of sense. Now, if you're buying a deal and you're syndicating a deal, it gets a lot more complicated because you have partners, you have to have preferred rates of return. If you're looking at it from a perspective of how do I make a deal work in syndication, you see what your cost of capital is. Let's say your cost of capital back 2 years ago was 3%, and you have an 8% preferred rate of return, 3% that you got to give to the bank, 8% to the investors. You need to be making at least 11% return to be able to make that deal work. Not difficult. You can look at a debt coverage ratio, a 1.25 debt coverage ratio. That's what they're looking for as well. Well, what happened to the cost of capital? It's a 6% now. And you've got to get an 8 pref, 8 plus 6. You're talking 14% that you got to make in that money. It's challenging to do that with deals right now. That's why in the last 2 years, something that I was warning people not to do, the finance right, people were buying stabilized deals on bridge financing. And it's a good idea until rates go up. And everyone was saying inflation is transitory. And I knew, and anyone boots on the ground who had a business knew that inflation wasn't going away. And it's still around. It's just, listen, when you got 6 kids, you know the cost of eggs. No matter how much money you make, you go to the grocery store, you're walking out of there. When you leave Costco and the guy goes, wow, you bought a lot of shit, you know what bills are.
I can't. Gino, those eggs aren't 8% more than they were a couple years ago either. They're more like 50. So yeah,
dude, I can't leave Costco without spending $800. I'm just saying. It's painful. So when you see that, you're saying to yourself, the bridge financing. Listen, they were buying stabilized deals on bridge debt because the debt coverage ratio wasn't there. So the newer investors, people that had that FOMO, get that right, were forcing deals. Please, when you're underwriting deals, stay true to what your buy box is. And when you're buying deals, like, you know what, I'm going to buy a deal that's older, got a lot of studios, don't like the median income, that's when you make mistakes. So you really have to understand what the criteria is, because one of the biggest mistakes we made was buying a deal with really low median income. It was a great build, brick, townhomes. The residents were paying their own water. It was just phenomenal, except it was not in a great area. So no matter what you did, you couldn't even keep employees. The residents were just running around during the day shooting guns, and like, who knew that? We went out and inspected the property at night. No one told us how bad it was during the day, though. Who would have thought? So it's one of those things when you deviate from that. But to really, I guess, to try to complete your question, once you're looking at that, once you understand the criteria, it's simply math. It really comes down to, what are you looking to do? Are you looking just for a capital appreciation play where you're buying this asset and you're trying to crystallize some equity and flipping it out? Or are you trying to buy a property that has a mixture of both? We, like I said, post renovation, buying an asset that's $100,000 a unit, we want at least $1,000 a month in rent we can get to. And then once we're able to stabilize the asset, we want to be able to refinance it out, pull that equity out, and go buy the next deal.
Got it. So if somebody's looking to buy like a 50-unit apartment complex, and I don't know if we really asked this type of detailed question, but I'm curious, like when this asset is stabilized, and you can pick whatever number you want, 30 unit, 50 unit, when the asset's stabilized, you mentioned, what you'd like to get in rent. What do you like to see in a cash flow number? Is it per door? Is it per, I threw out 50 units because I'm saying if you own a 50 unit and you can make up whatever numbers you want. I'm just curious, what do you think that something like that could cash flow for people that are listening and like, okay, I can set a goal to buy a 50 unit in the next year, and I can expect in 18 months from there, once it's stabilized, renovations are done, I could be in this range. And obviously, make it a range, but I'm just curious what you think.
I'm going to sound like an attorney now. It depends.
Yep. Yeah, we know.
But it's a great question because nobody wants to talk about that. And that's the most important metric in our lives. It's PPU.
Why you do it, right?
Profit per unit. And I'm blown away by how few people even know what that metric means. They don't ever use it. We want to generate at least $250 in profit per unit on our portfolio. That's what we've been hitting consistently for the last, 36 months, 3 years plus. But it's because we own the equity in it and we're able to, profit on that. And it's our market. If you're in San Francisco and you're profiting $250 a door, you're going to be in a serious world of hurt. If you're in New York, obviously the rents are there. The cost per unit is exponentially a lot more than what they are in Knoxville. So I'm looking at the east part of Knoxville. If you can get between $200 and $300 per unit, you're doing really well. That's after everything, after your debt's paid, after your expenses are paid, after CapEx is paid. That's what we're looking to profit. And that's why for us, once we had realized that, let's pump the brakes here. We don't need to own 17,000 units. We're pretty happy with 1,800 units where we own the majority of our equity. We've done 3 syndications. We're exiting the third one actually on Wednesday. We're selling our third syndication. We're going to crystallize that equity, and now we're just going to put that deal, and we're going to start buying all the rest of our deals with our own capital. Now, if a deal comes up that's $40 million and we love, we'll obviously raise for that. But you bring up a really important point. What are the KPIs that you're trying to accomplish? If you're starting out, syndication is phenomenal because you can create some type of acquisition fees. You can create a business within a business. You have the property itself, and then you have your investors. You have, the ability to exit deals and crystallize equity in the back end. You have asset management fees, disposition fees. You have that business in and of itself. That's great. We're at the point where we don't need to own thousands of units. We can do 200 to 300 units a year with our own capital, and it works really well. But when we had that point between 2017 and 18, we're running out of money and we want to continue to grow, we thought, hey, syndication's great. And like I said, we did 3. It bridged the gap. So then those deals started to matriculate. We started, refining our deals from 16 and 17. That money started coming in. The fees from 2018, those AC fees that we actually rolled in to the deal. And I am shocked at the IRR that syndicators make on these deals. I mean, investors make a 17 or 18 IRR. The guys in the GP are making 50, 60 IRR because they've got their cash flow day one, those acquisition fees. So it's an amazing business. You just need to be financial stewards of your investors. You need to make sure the deal checks your box and their box. And it's a phenomenal, way to create a ton of equity. But on that deal, if you're doing $250 profit per unit, you're splitting that between the limited partners and between the general partners on that deal.
I'll let you go in a second. I just have a response to that. What we've learned in raising capital and in doing deals with, doing joint ventures and really just forming partnerships is that there's a lot of people out there that are raising money. Like there's a lot of people that or just do a deal with anybody, right? And I think that learning the morals and the values and the really getting to know your partners is, for us, we found the best way to get involved in any syndications. We have done syndications with 3 partners, right? And we've been very selective because a lot of people have asked us, and we're like, these are the people that we want to work with, and I think that, not that there's not other people out there, I'm sure there are, but having that not only criteria for buying, but the criteria for who you want to do business with, I think is paramount, especially if you're getting into syndications.
It's values-based decision-making with anything in life. You base your values and your objectives and your goals. Do they align with the person you're trying to work with? And for me and Jake, that's why we've been partners for the last 15 years. We're going to continue because we love multifamily. It's boring. We can build an enduring business. We're vertically integrated, so we have about 85 people on our property management team. We love that aspect of the business. We're not going to go out and invest in crypto. It's not our space. Don't really like it. We're going to stay focused, and I think that's important. So when you're trying to pick operators or people to raise capital for, do they align with your values? Do they align with your goals? Do they align with your objectives? And does it fit your buy right criteria? Does it fit your buy box? And if it doesn't on any of those, then you make a hard pass and you go find someone who does.
Yep. So I wanted to touch on this. It's actually great that you brought up the partnership aspect. I wanted to talk about you and Jake and kind of who fills what role within the company. Because I know there's a lot going on, right? You guys not only have some books out, you guys have an education platform, you also still doing deals. So can you kind of give us how you guys steer your ship? Like what seat you fill? And maybe you're doing some of the same things, but I imagine you divide and conquer.
Yeah, let's start from the very beginning, because in the very beginning, there is no such thing as roles and responsibilities. It's I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And that's the reality up until you get about 100 units. And if that's not the case, listen, I will probably take a bullet for 5 or 6 people on the planet, not including my kids. And Jake's probably one of them. And I think he'd probably say the same thing about me. And if you're not willing to work hard for your partner and you're willing to make excuses, on December 18th of last year, he calls me up and goes, we're having problems with the title company. Can you fly up? We got to close the deal. I need wet signatures. We were just doing a deal with a credit union. We'd never worked with them before. The inner person in me said, damn, I got 5 days before Christmas here. I've got a busy week. I can't spend the whole day and just flap to Knoxville. That, crossed my mind. And 3 seconds later, I was like, yep, I got on a plane. That's the reality. If you're not willing to do that for your partner, then don't partner, because he's done tough stuff for me. So you have to understand and make those sacrifices. If you're not willing to work harder for your partner than he is for you, then I don't think you should be in a partnership. When we first started, it was a little bit of everything. Jake really didn't know what the hell he was doing. He'd never been an entrepreneur. That first month that he collected cash from the apartments, I remember he laid it out on his desk. He's like, dude, this is amazing. People are paying me. I'm like, Jake, first of all, we shouldn't be collecting cash. But second of all, I'm grateful that you did that. And it was just like we did everything. We were doing everything together. We were writing leases together. We had the website going on together. He was property managing. I was bookkeeping. I was asset managing. We were learning all the aspects of the business together. As it grew, he started taking care of the property management side of the business. And I said, let me start the education, because if we're going to start a syndication company and grow investors, what better way than to have this education company where we write a book, we create a brand, and we started doing that. So we started splitting off, where he was doing property management day to day and I was doing education day to day. And when we talk about, multiple streams of revenue, how beautiful is that? You've got a property management company, you've got an education company, you've got a syndication company. All of a sudden, all these things start working so well together. And that's how we broke it up. But in the beginning, I think partners should be willing to work together on everything. Then as you start working, you'll start gravitating towards what you like. He loved actually the whole property management side of the business. I love the personal development, talking, getting on podcasts, growing the brand, being more visible out there, sharing how impactful it can be for the family. So I gravitated towards that side of the business.
That's cool. That's exactly what I was looking for. I think at some points it gets tough when, just speaking candidly from our partnership, when you both like the same things, and then you realize, you mentioned doing the hard stuff and be willing to go the extra mile for the other person. Like, there's points where we both step up and we're like, dude, the other guy doesn't want to do it. And they just end up, they're doing it because you don't want to do it. And so it's an interesting dynamic. And I'm wondering if there's how you guys have woven in things that you've both wanted to, or both not wanted to do. And maybe you're like, for example, what would you have done if he wanted to do the education thing and you still want to do the education thing, or you weren't really into the property management thing? Is that when you go hire someone else? And the reason I ask that is, like, it's tough to bring someone in. We're very protective of each other and of the businesses that we've built. And not wanting to let someone else in, right? Because it could disrupt things. But I know at some points, you need to delegate and just kind of navigating that side of the business. I'm curious what you've done.
I think you've answered your own question. I mean, it's a great point you made. If you don't like it, hire somebody. I personally did not like getting on investor calls and talking to investors. So we brought somebody in to do that. Now, unfortunately, his views didn't align with ours. We had to let him go. He was young. I mean, part of the problem was our compensation, how he was getting compensated based on doing deals. So did he care about median income? Did he care about a lot of these things? He just found to find deals and do deals. But if you're not good at something, hire it out. Find somebody that can help you do that aspect of the business. And, there are things that I don't like to do. There are things that he doesn't like to do. But I guess we just figure it out and bring it on as a case-by-case basis. But it's one of those things, being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things you're not going to like to do. That's just the reality. And you're just going to have to say to yourself, I got to do it. There's a lot of meetings that I don't want to be on, a lot of meetings that he doesn't want to be on. As an entrepreneur, you really need to listen to your employees and be there and be present. And that can be soul-sucking sometimes. He's not good at that. I am more of a better listener than him. So there's certain things where if you can hire it out, hire it out. If you need to bring another partner, just make sure that there's alignment, make sure that there's expectations met. And one of the things when bringing in somebody and giving them equity, always look at it and say, is this a position that I can hire? Like, I wouldn't bring in somebody to underwrite deals. You can hire that task out, right? But somebody who's going to represent the brand and be a brand ambassador and speak to investors and be on webinars with you and go out and hunt deals, and that may be a position you may not be able to find an employee for, where you may say to yourself, I need to look for somebody that can represent the brand. And people are saying, well, you're 50-50 right now. I'm going to lose 17% of the equity because we're going 33, 33, 33. But if that partner can find another deal a year, or can, make you much more efficient at what you're doing and can push you towards what you like to do, man, it's worth giving up 17% to do more deals and to make more money in the long run, isn't it?
Yeah, Gino, I love listening to you, man. Like, I just candidly, just off script right here, you have a great answer for pretty much everything. I don't know if it's because you've done a ton of these podcasts or you just educate people, but
no, I've made a ton of mistakes, brother. Every mistake you can think of, I've made it. I've gone through all this shit. I've swallowed shit for a lot of years of my life, and that's the reality. Everyone's making these mistakes in 2020 and 21, bridge debt. I did that back in 2008. I made those mistakes and I had bad deals. And listen, it's another one of those. If you're losing money right now, it's okay. I met the Maserati Mikes of the world. My first deal in 2005 was with a guy named Maserati Mike. He drove into my parking lot. He had a nice shiny gold Maserati. He gets out. Con artist. I put $172,000 with the guy. It was a lot of money for me back then. I was 35 years old. I had 3 kids at the time. And this sucker, 18 months later, loses the mobile home park. It was a syndication. I didn't have any documents. He didn't put any money in the deal. But I look back at it, and the reason why I can talk to you about partnerships, and I still make mistakes with partnerships to this day, but that guy was not the guy. And ultimately, it was not his fault. It was my fault, because going back to T. Harv Eker and the responsibility, I chose a bad partner. I chose a shortcut. I chose to get rich. I had to get there-itis, and that's what I made a mistake. That's why over the last 2 years, in 2021 and 2022, we did a total of maybe 200 units. It was painful. Everyone else is doing deals except for me and Jake. I'm like, Jake, what are we doing wrong? And he's like, just bide your time. It'll be okay. Last year, we did 3 deals. Great. We're back at it. This year, it seems like it's a little bit slow again. I think just stay the course and don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Get clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And having a great partner will help you do that, because there are days when I'm like, man, I feel lost today. I can pick up the phone, give him a call, and things are a lot better.
Yeah. I love talking to veterans in the game like you, Gino, because it's a testament to, we haven't talked to anybody who has said, yeah, man, every single thing I've done has worked out. It's been great. I got no bruises. I got no bumps. I got no bad stories to tell. And so if you're listening to that, it tells you that the fear is just what's stopping you from getting in or doing the thing and being able to fuck up and just be okay with it. The key is what you said at the very beginning of the show is getting your financial house in order. How do you want to run your own household? How do you want to run your personal finance? Like, if you can get that picture painted and that there's certain money that you're not going to touch, you're going to have it for you, then you can maybe more freely go into business and be able to risk a little bit more. The only thing that you can't have happen is have your first deal bankrupt you. If your first deal doesn't bankrupt you, you either have a win or just a ton of lessons to figure out how to do the next one. And that's kind of the way that we look at it. And I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you look like you've been through some of these things here. You've done a lot. And it's like every person that we talk to is in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're in our 30s is like, yeah, you got to get hit a couple times and still come out on top. So I just love that you mentioned that.
I agree.
Yeah. So let's talk about, as we wind down the show here, I want to talk, you have a lot, you've published books, you have your podcasts of your own. I think, you have over 5 million downloads, which is
amongst like 5 podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about your podcast. Talk about like, I didn't realize you had that many actually. What are they all siphoned for certain things? Like what was your goal behind that? The books, and some of the publishings that you've done.
Oh, it's one of those things with branding. You always make mistakes. I mean, we started this podcast. We called it Wheelbarrow Profits. I mean, what idiots call a podcast Wheelbarrow Profits? I mean, like, you don't even know what the hell it's about.
I don't know. We have the weekly juice.
How about the weekly juice when you asked us the first question of coming on the damn show, dude? And you're like, oh, it must be a big orange juice, guys. Like, oh, shit. Here we go.
So my point, but to me, Wheelbarrow Profits signified the wheelbarrow, the 3-legged framework of multifamily. Then we just changed it over to the Jake and Gino show because I don't want to just interview people about multifamily. We can all get on and talk about real estate and cap rates and cash on cash. That gets boring after a while. I'd rather talk to an entrepreneur to see what they struggled about. And when you talk about people with other businesses, business, as they say, is business. Whether you're in the real estate business, the restaurant business, there are a lot of similarities that coincide in business. And to hear other people's stories is more entertaining and it's more educational. So the Jake and Gino shows thought leaders, entrepreneurs, real estate. That's what we talk about. I have a podcast with my wife called the Julie and Gino Show, and that's more about family, connection, relationships. I mean, we've interviewed J.P. Sears, Michael Franzese. We've interviewed the author of the 5 Love Languages, Dr. Gary Chapman. So that's more about, how do you create a relationship? We're making all this money. How do you have a great relationship with your family, with your spouse? That to me is really important. I think family is so often underlooked as the problem that we have in our country right now. I mean, you could talk about the educational system, great. You know what? A lot of people send their kids to school. The ones who have strong families and strong foundations, it's a lot harder to knock that building down than it is one that people don't have. They're strong parents. And men, you got to step it up. You got to stop making excuses. So for me, the Julie and Gino show is really important. We have a Movers and Shakers show that I highlight every couple of weeks. Show comes out with the student closing deals. It's awesome. Our students have done over 75,000 units. They've closed over $5 billion. They've raised over $500 million. So I want to highlight the students. I want to give them a platform. And there's a lot about story, about their origin story, about their why. And then we go into their deals. And then the last show is the how-to. How-to multifamily, 10-minute show that I air every week. And we talk about the specifics of are we talking about property management that day? Are we talking about financing? Are we talking about customer service? Whatever it does, we deal specifically with multifamily in the how-to show.
So how do you manage all this? And what that's too top level of a question. What I mean is the systems and processes you have in place. I'm thinking, do you have a producer that edits all these shows and then uploads them? Are you doing things? The reason I ask this, I know how much goes into one show, and we have a 45-minute to an hour show a week. Plus, we do 3 clips on Instagram, managing some partnerships on the side with sponsors and such, right? You got your 5 times that, plus you have a couple books out. So, and I know you have an educational platform, newsletters, there's things, right? So maybe just kind of selfishly, how do you handle the back end type of things as well as kind of continue to do the real estate?
Well, we started out with the one podcast 6 years ago, and Jake was editing the podcast. Talk about something that he sucks at. That is
Sorry, Jake, if you're listening.
We have a Jake too.
He
doesn't suck though.
He'll even tell you it was the worst thing in the world. But then after that, we hired somebody to edit the podcast, and we had one show. And you get good at that show, and all of a sudden you just say to yourself, I'm bored. Let's do something else. And then you figure something else out. And then you start hiring. And the key to hiring is if you're thinking about, I need a VA to help me out with this, you're way past it. You already need that person. So for us, it was just that gradual progression, building muscle, taking one step at a time, learning how to do a podcast, getting pretty good at one, and then saying, okay, I think we can start another one. And then all of a sudden scaling up. And for people who think that the education space man, there's a lot of money to be made in education. That's just simply not true for the vast majority of us mortals. Unless you're Alex Hormozy or, a top influencer, it's a grind to make money. You're not doing it for the money. I love this because I learned so much crap about real estate on these shows and so many things about systems and processes from the people that I interview. And listen, it's always nice to get a Jake and Gino student wholesaling a deal for us last year. It's great. It's great when a broker calls and goes, Jake and Gino, I want to do a deal with you guys. And he gets us a deal fourth quarter of last year. So there's so many benefits to doing this. And especially if you're syndicating and you're out there raising money and you're able to focus on that and try to grow a tribe from that perspective. I just wanted to grow a tribe of community of people who really are focused on their faith, focused on their finances, and focused on their family. That's the people that I want to attract. Yeah. And if I can surround myself with people like that and I can help them, those people are going to help me as well. They're going to make me live a more impactful life. They're going to give me more purpose in this world. And that's what I'm trying to focus on. But really, it comes down to just starting out being clear. Write your first book. Start your first podcast. Don't worry about the fifth one. We're always thinking about 5 years down the road, which we should. Let's worry about the next 6 to 12 months, what we can accomplish there. And then from there, the year is over. You're like, wow, I launched a podcast. Great. What's the next thing?
I like that. Yep. Thanks. Yeah, there was a lot there. I had one thing and it slipped my mind.
That's okay. I have something to say. Maybe it'll come back to you. But the relationship capital, we use that word a lot here, Gino, because what you're doing, and I love the podcast that you have with your wife, because everyone says what your why, for example, like, oh, I want to build this big empire so I can spend more time with my family, and it always comes back to that, like, spend more time with my family. What if you hate your family? You know what I mean? Like, that's the most important thing you have, right? So building that relationship with a tribe, a community, your family, people that you can go to is really the ultimate thing in my eyes. That's so important, because why make money if you can't enjoy it with people? Or why even put all this effort and grind and to do what, really? So I think that you have the facets there is it's special. So
Corey, that's an important question, because there have been empires built by people who hated their dads and wanted to prove to their friends that they weren't losers, and they went and built $1 billion company, and then they realized that didn't bring them happiness. They would rather hung around and played guitar in a bar.
Yeah, how about that climb up there, right?
There's nothing wrong with either. Just be clear what you want. And most of us aren't clear on what we want. And that's the problem. Like I said, I'm not here to tell you to get into multifamily. If you truly love working with assisted living, or you truly love to work with Section 8, so it's really important to get clear on what you want. And if you don't understand why you're doing something, all of a sudden you've created this empire. You're like, I wasted my whole life. I built and made all this money, and I'm not happy. Well, what brings you happiness? Why are you here? That's the real important question. And once you find that out, just lean into that.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's so interesting. When we talk to entrepreneurs and like, we start with the why, right? People that are still on their journey to financial independence, and they're just like, well, I want to be able to do what I want when I want. And then no one takes it further than that. But like, what do you want and when do you want it? And it's like, well, I just want to be able to wake up and like literally have control of my schedule. But then what are you going to do with your schedule, right? Like, that's when the apprehension comes. Like, I don't know, why are you asking me, dude? I'm like, well, you just said you wanted the time and freedom to do what you want. What the heck do you want to do? They have no idea. So that's why people continue in that cycle, right? Grind. You're 65 and you're like, shit, like, I'm tired now, man. Let's go hit the beach or something. Well,
Ryan, the more important question is, why are they so busy? What are you hiding from? Have you ever met somebody, and I am to blame on this, but they're always doing something. They're always reading a book. They're always going to a seminar. They're always listening to another podcast. They're always trying to do another deal. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you just need to make a mental check and say to yourself, what am I hiding from? What am I avoiding? Why am I not asking myself these tough questions? Sometimes you just have to come to Jesus moment and say, I'm doing that. I'm hiding from something. What is that? And that's when you start your personal growth and your personal journey, because we all have that baggage. And us as entrepreneurs, we want to say, yeah, we want to grind, but what are we grinding for? What are we trying to avoid? That's a tough question for a lot of us to answer.
I wouldn't even know how to approach that. Like, that's deep psychological right there.
Yeah, we don't want to work on that, because for some of us, like, where's the money in that? There's no money in that. But that's the question. Why was I in the shed talking to Jake, negotiating an $11 million deal?
You're addicted, dude.
not wanting anyone to know what I was doing. I was the pizza guy. I realized, well, I'm hiding out there. Why am I hiding out there? And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, why am I hiding in the kitchen? It's because life is comfortable, but at the same time, it's torturous. It was comfortable, and you get to a point in your life where you're either slightly uncomfortable, but you can tolerate it, or you really hate your life and you really have to figure something out. I don't want people to get to that point, but that's where a lot of us have to get to, where we start questioning our own existence and saying, there's got to be something more than the 9 to 5. I just don't like what I'm doing here. And I think a lot of us get to that point, and then all of a sudden we're like, what's next? And that's where we go start our journey and start asking ourselves those questions. And then we get busy because we don't like the answer to those questions. And that can be really hard.
Do you think, this is interesting, I love talking about this stuff and going layers deep here to try to figure out ourselves, right? At the end of the day, it's almost like, I mentioned that I jokingly just said you're addicted, but there's something about the game aspect of it, right? Like, it's, I don't know how to explain it. Like, sport, I played sports growing up. I've also played, some people relate to this, some people don't, but I bring up like video games, right? You just like, there's levels, and you climb each level, and you try to become the best version, and you complete the game, or you become the best player on the court or on the field and help your team win, right? And so I think about all the time where like I go to the 9 to 5, and mine's in sales. So there's hustle in there. There's grind and competition, right? Which I need, right? I feel like I need that. I don't think I'd be good at all at here, slap me with 50 to 100K or whatever a salary is these days, and just do a task every day. I need to be able to chase something, right? The little carrot. And so I think that's what excites me about entrepreneurship. And I want to be the best version of myself, but also it's kind of the world, it revolves around money these days. And a lot of people value, and then this is not right. Not that, and I'm not saying this is how I value life, but like, the more money you have, you're winning the game. You're doing better at the game, right? But there's so many layers to that, like health, family, etc. And it changes as you grow up. So I'm trying to answer that question that you asked, like, why are you doing this? And it's almost this weird fulfillment of like, I want to be able to prove that I made it on my own and I didn't need to work for a paycheck. But then when I get there, when I get to like the made it, I'm more actually just fulfilled doing some of the things that we're doing. I like creating the businesses. I like doing the design work, the marketing. I like connecting with people. I'm very curious. Like, how the hell did Gino get to where he got? I love these podcasts. So I'm genuinely curious how you came from X and made it to Y, and just how people think and tick and like the psychology around it. So it's very hard for me to answer that question, but it's a thinker. So,
well, keep thinking about it, because when you say a couple of words, that's why you when you work with a coach or a therapist, I would think more of a life coach. You think you say the word game in sports, and you're competitive, and you're in sales. That's what drives you. That's your blueprint. That's your makeup, right? I mean, when you go back to your younger self, where do you see yourself when you're 9 to 14 years old? If you were hanging around with a lot of people and you were doing the sports thing and you loved working with teams and stuff, as you get older, I mean, where do you see yourself gravitating towards? And that's the important thing. And what do you think? What do you see yourself being happy? Like, when will you just start thinking about ideas back when you were younger? What brought you happiness? What brought you joy? For me, when I was a young kid, I loved working with my dad. He'd bring me to work. I felt really proud when I saw him at work, because I said, hey, everyone loves Chef Vito, and they really respected him. And I'm like, I want to be like that one day. I just never saw myself working for somebody. I just never did. I went to work for AIG for a year. I thought it was the most soul-sucking thing on the planet, man. Working in a cubicle, it was horrible. I just wasn't programmed to do that. And for me, that's how I grew up. So for you, looking at money and value and all that kind of stuff, those are hard questions to answer by yourself. Yeah. So it's at one point, I mean, look for a life coach. Coaches are great.
I love that life coach, that point there, because I think it's something that you and I are going to want to separately have in the future, because that whole, for me to kind of answer the question that you asked us, is like, I found myself kind of, addicted isn't the right word. I don't know if it's obsessed, but it's like loving the progress. Like, I like watching myself get better at various facets of my life. I like watching myself get better at health, at wealth, I love watching my relationships with other people flourish. And I love bringing value to them. Selfishly, I love bringing value to other people and then having them be like, wow, like he thought of this or he did that. And I love, like getting better at sports. I love getting stronger. Like all those things that progress that if you break it down, it really comes down to like just getting one step better at something. And
So
it's not always fun.
why do you want to get better? What's driving you to get better? Like go back to when you were a little kid. So there's either, one of my mentors told me, it's either a lighthouse moment where you're going towards the light. You saw somebody in your life that you wanted to really emulate, or he called it a foghorn moment. You're running away from somebody like your dad. I don't want to be anything like my dad because he was a loser, alcoholic, beating my mom up, or I love my dad. He was such a role model. So like taking a deep dive into that will make you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then is it an empowering thing? And then on top of that, let's look at the real estate aspect of it. Does real estate even fit into this? Are you getting better at real estate because you think you should be getting better at something? Or what do you really like to do? Do you like to build teams? Do you like sales? Like raising capital sort of is like sales. You're going out there and you're bringing people an opportunity and you're bringing them something that they can't do by themselves. And it's competitive because you're trying to sign people up. So that's what I'm saying. Like you keep asking yourself these questions and keep going down and keep going down. Keep going down that was, as people like to say, the proverbial rabbit hole. You start learning more about yourself. You start learning why you start doing certain things and habits you take.
I think there's combos of like running from something, but then also chasing something.
Yes.
I feel like I have both of those now vividly in my head. Like for me, I guess I'll just be candid with it. One is, both of our dads are entrepreneurs, so I don't know how it relates, but my dad and his brothers, they all had their own businesses, blue collar stuff, but they had their own businesses. And he's always like, you always want to work for yourself. You'll realize one day, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, like, blah, blah. But he was always very well respected in town, always had the trucks with our last name on it. And it was like, everyone knew who he was. And I was like, whoa, I want to be like dad. Like,
yes,
he's a badass. And so, you go, like I did landscaping and stuff growing up, then you get the 9-to-5 job. And you're like, okay, like there's a lot of people here. There's not just dad running the show. Like I'm like working the dad of the company. It's like, I don't know if I'll ever talk to the guy, you know what I mean? So that's one thing. And then the chip on your shoulder aspect, I guess, if you will, or the thing that's like, what are you running away from? It's like, I think I'm bringing it back to like sports. Like some of my friends got picked for the all-star team. I got snubbed, or I was short. I was out of shape. I had to figure out how to get out of that. Maybe I was late to puberty, whatever. Like a lot of combos, like, okay, well now I go to the gym. I can't miss a day, or I'm back to I'm running away from the old guy, the old self who didn't get selected, right? I want to prove that I can be someone that maybe someone back in the day didn't think I could be, which is so weird to even think about and like correlate these together. But
yes,
I feel like
and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with anything you're saying. Like, that's the cool thing. Like that's a great way to motivate yourself to go to the gym. You should be healthy, but at some point, you just have to be careful if you become obsessive at some point. That we can obsess about certain things.
Oh, yeah.
There's a fine line. And just understanding why you're taking those actions. Why are you not going to the gym? I mean, it's really interesting. I'm just saying you in general, but certain people, why are they not taking their health? Something may have happened years ago where it just affected them negatively, and now they just don't even know. It's unconscious. It's in their subconscious. And then for you to just go back and to think about that, it's like, oh, wow, I never thought about it.
Gino, these are my favorite conversations. So I feel like one out of every maybe like 10 podcasts we end up going this way, or maybe more, one out of every 5. They're my favorite conversations because in American society, there is this just emphasis on hustle and money and status and things that, like, if people say they don't care about status, like we all do, you know what I mean? Like we all at some level do, right? Doesn't mean that you want to like, be in a mansion at the top of a mountain, like all the time. But the reason why I even bring this up is that I think to get down the layers, to go as deep as you possibly can, it's the most important question you can ask yourself. It's like, it should come before any of the other things. And we do it so rarely, I feel like, that every now and then, that every month or 2 months or 3 months, that reset, did I pick the right fork in the road, right? Did I pick that path that's working for me? And you know what? You might not be optimized all the time. I take fucking creatine and vitamins and supplements and all this stuff. And it's like, it's exhausting. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to do it every second of every day. But to ask myself why I care so much is a very interesting question. Like it's enlightening. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I don't think we intended to go down this road, but I love that we did.
This is awesome. And actually it's so interesting. I want to talk about this. We talk about, when I say we, Corey and I have talked about this a lot. We're like, at one point we decided we need to join a mastermind because we need to surround ourselves with other people like us. We joined two actually, and they're okay. We realized we have a mastermind every Wednesday where we, it's weird, smaller one, but we get to interview people that are of the same mindset as us and get to learn trials and tribulations one-on-one. So it's better than being in a group setting. And then going further, it's like, okay, well, we need to hire a coach. And so we have not gone that. We did hire a coach and we jumped into that mastermind. We took another pivot. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that's a coach, like a performance-based coach. The life coach thing is so interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And maybe that we can end the podcast with this, just like how you got into life coaching. And for me, I'm like, how does one even go about that, right? Did you have to realize you got to a certain point in your life where you're like, I can educate the masses on maybe like health, wealth, happiness, money, etc.? Do you have to be well-rounded? How did you decide this was something that was in your arsenal that you wanted to do or that you might even be good at it? There's a lot there, but just take us down this lane because we have not talked to a life coach yet.
Well, so 50 years ago, it wasn't a sexy thing. I mean, life coaching has gone full circle now, and sometimes it gets a negative stigma. And for me, I just wanted more personal development. I had loved Tony Robbins. I had loved Zig Ziglar. I had loved Jim Rohn. I loved all those guys, and I wanted more. So I looked up life coaching, and I went to a school called IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. I loved their framework. I loved the stuff that I learned there. I loved the empowering questions. I loved the why. I love to be able to ask people, all these questions that I'm asking you guys. What's holding you back? What's blocking you? All of these different levels of energy. I really liked it because you're asking yourself these questions, and I think that's the basis of life, being able to ask somebody questions and being able to have them answer these questions and pull it out because we all have the answers in ourselves. So for me, I found it to be revolutionary. Then my wife, a couple of years later, kept asking me, what do you do for a living? What do you do? What do you do? I said, I'm a life coach. She didn't understand. She ended up becoming a life coach, and she's probably better than me at it. She's excellent. She's a really good listener. She challenges people. And for anybody out there looking for a little bit more personal development, looking for something a little bit different, I think life coaching is phenomenal. I truly love it. There's a guy called Brendan Burchard. He does something called high performance coaching, which is more of like a business coaching. So there's coaching and there's consulting, right? Consultant is going to tell you what to do. Okay, you guys got to grow 10 units, this market, I'll show you how to do that. A coach is just going to ask you really good questions, what I've been doing with you guys, and let you guys sit there and let you guys think and let you guys ponder. I'm detached. You guys want to become billionaires? Go ahead. You guys want to become homeless? I don't really care. You guys got to care. And I have to be good enough and skilled enough to be able to ask those questions and let you say what you want. And I think that's the difference between a great coach and a consultant. And therapy, you can mix that in as well. Therapy is just going to look back into your past. And we all need to do that. We all need to know what happened when we were children. We all need to figure out, did we have a good childhood, bad childhood? What happened? The problem with therapy, in my opinion, is I think they stay there a little too far. They stay there a little too long and they dwell on it. Whereas coaches sometimes don't want to look in the past and go, okay, guys, what's the next thing we got to do? Buy another deal? Okay, let's take a step back. Why are we buying this deal? What's it going to look like for us? And do you even want to buy a deal? Right? So those are the things that I think a coach can bring about. So if you're having challenging issues and you really, if you're having some kind of mental illness, the therapy route is definitely the way to go. But if you're just starting out, having a conversation with a therapist or a coach is great. I think they're both really excellent modalities. I love life coaching because I've got another guy who I've been working with on childhood and stuff like that. That's been phenomenal for me. I just don't want to sit back there and relive it. I want to figure out what the trauma, what happened to me in my past, let that come up, let that sit with myself. How do I have closure with it? And sometimes there's no answer. There's no closure to it. But I want to be able to understand why those emotions well up inside of me. Where are they coming from? And let me understand that when they do come, hey, this is how I can act. This is what I can do. And for me, I love both aspects of it. Coaching to me is just completely changed my life.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's having a bipartisan person take a look into your world without having the baggage or the relationships or all the things that come along with it that other people already know about you. I've personally had trouble having conversations with family members about issues or some things in my life, just because of how close they are to me. You know what I mean? So that therapy, that coach is, it seems like an amazing way. And you kind of dissected us even a little bit there. So I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to thank you for coming on. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but you got 6 kids to get back to, so we'll let you do that. If people want to learn more about you, Gino, which I don't know how after listening to this episode that you wouldn't, syndications, multifamily, the coaching, the podcast, the books, you're doing it all. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
JakeandGino.com. Just go to the website. We've got the podcasts, we've got the books, we've got the blogs. If you want to know more about multifamily, go visit Jake and Gino. If you want to learn more about my family, Instagram handle is Gino's Family. I have Jake and Gino's an Instagram handle, and we have Gino's Family as an Instagram handle as well.
Cool. Gino, it was an absolute pleasure. Thanks again for joining us. And this is one of my absolute favorite episodes, so we really appreciate you.
Thanks, boys.
Thanks for tuning in this week to the Weekly Juice Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and share with friends. The more ratings we get, the more ears we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you with more high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod, where we post daily tips and tricks and document our own journey towards financial freedom. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice.